Mississippi. As we continue the jam-packed 7 o'clock hour, here with us in studio is Speaker of the House, Jason White. How you doing, Mr. Speaker?
I'm good, Lucien. Good to be with you this morning.
Yeah, we try to keep everybody on their toes by having that microphone just a little bit broken. I was here with Gerard. Exact same thing happened. He's talking, and I'm going, did I pull this son of a gun out? Is it unplugged now? So,
it would fit right in under the current circumstances.
We want to get under your skin just enough.
That's right. Keeps
get you rattled.
Not under my skin. Just keep you on your toes, as you say.
Exactly. You don't want anybody to ever get too comfortable. So. Well, congrats on being on the other side of Sine Die. I know it's always y'all spend a lot of time down here, do a lot of work, and it's probably good to get back to your paying job.
It is. I have a law office that's on fire, so we were able to put out a few fires last week and over the weekend, that sort of thing. So we'll figure it out going forward.
Yeah.
We've got a little business left to do at the CAP, so we'll figure that out between now and the end of June. And
so talk on that subject. Talk to us a little. I mean, the major. I know there are general bills that people are interested in that didn't happen this year, but the main thing that has to happen is coming up with final appropriations.
Yeah, and so that us signing down and leaving and finishing the 2025 regular session, that was different for us, and I would say not good, simply because I think we had some really great things happen legislative-wise during the session, but then to sign it out without a budget, it was kind of, you were left a little, I don't know, this feeling is different. So that was hanging over. So we'll figure that out. Like, what does that look like going forward? We're not that far apart with the Senate necessarily on the numbers on the budget. We agreed, Joint Legislative Budget Committee meets all summer and fall. That's made up of House and Senate members in leadership and the appropriators for sure on those committees. And so the budget where we are currently of those 100 and some odd budgets, we're not that far apart necessarily on general fund spending. There seems to be a major disagreement on 2 or 3 budgets, and in addition to that, whether or not we're going to spend any of our cash, any of our capital expense money on projects, if you will, on infrastructure, if you will. So we had a real issue with the process of budgeting, and we had communicated that clearly to the Senate early on, actually last year, but at the end of session last year, we communicated clearly that going forward we would do it in a much more orderly process and transparent, not in the middle of the night. So contrary to what you might hear from the other end of the building, nobody was surprised when we came to Friday, approaching what was traditionally the conference weekend, and we didn't have a budget, and we're a long ways from one, and folks started talking about filing dummy bills, and that's, the wheels totally came off. But I will say this, even if we could agree on the few budgets that we differ on, there's a major sticking point and difference regarding capital expense and what's going to be spent on local government infrastructure. So we've got to get that part worked out.
For folks who don't know, explain a little bit what the capital expense fund is and how it's funded, if you can.
Because of the surpluses that we've run the last several years, we've banked a lot of money, and so for the last 5-6 years, we have spent anywhere from 50 to 150, $200 million on what I would call, some people call them CapEx projects, or local government things for cities and counties, like a road, a bridge, maybe in a municipality or maybe a county road. That's an inordinate expense. Maybe it's a $5 or $10 million bridge that a local government can otherwise find the funds, or maybe they've got part of the money and they need help from the state, those kind of things. Maybe it's a fire station, maybe it's a fire truck in a particular, rural area or in a city that's having trouble. Fire trucks cost $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 now, and some cities just can't make the math work on that. So you hear people talking about that. We've done that for several years. All of a sudden this year, we got to the end of session, and coming out of the Senate leadership was there's not going to be funds for local projects this year. And we've got $2.5 billion in the bank. Now, certainly, we want to be, like we always are, we want to be very cautious and conservative about how we spend our money. But that looked more like cities and counties were very supportive of House Bill 1. They actually wrote letters of endorsement, put them out all over the state. We advertised them. We were proud to receive those endorsements from both the County Supervisors Association as well as the Mississippi Municipal League, which represents all the cities. And so it just looked like maybe all of a sudden from Lieutenant Governor and Senate leadership, they don't want to fund local projects. And it looked to be a little bit of spillover from House Bill 1. And, we're going to protect our friends, those that help push something across the finish line. We're not just going to throw them out here to score political points.
Now, I imagine what they would say, and I hadn't discussed this, so maybe this is unfair, but I would imagine what they would say is because these tax cuts are coming, we've got to be careful about stockpiling cash so that if there is a shortfall, we haven't already spent it.
I don't know. I'll let them articulate their reasons. I won't begin to guess what Senate leadership is thinking.
Fair enough.
On most of that stuff.
It does,
we are
this
flush.
Is the real sticking point, though, right? Is capital expense spending for the most
It's going to be a sticking point because for some reason they identified a few projects that maybe were in some of their districts that they thought rose to a level of state importance that should be funded, but others, and by and large most others, should not be. So we're not going to go for that. We'll either spend money statewide or we won't spend any CapEx money. And we'll be fine with a level funded budget and no CapEx spend, and we'll move forward.
Because that does seem to be the big, I remember other times where the legislature has left without a budget. 2013, I think, was the last time where that happened. But you generally could articulate very clearly, here's the fight is about spending for this agency or these agencies, and this is the amount. That's what was striking about this, is it didn't feel like you could say, oh, well, they can't agree on Medicaid spending, or they can't agree on, what DPS, whether there's going to be a trooper school this year. I mean,
right. We're in a different era because of the surpluses. So now we've had the easy thing when agencies show up and want extra money for whatever. And I'm not saying those things that they advocate for aren't necessary or important. I'm just saying it's real easy, and you have to be careful when you have all this money sitting in the bank and somebody just wants another $20 million or another $5 million or this project, $1 million.
Oh, yeah.
The easy thing, instead of saying no or saying no, is that really a core function of government? The easy thing is just to fund it and avoid the friction and move on. And so what we've been able to do over the last several years is not do that. Now, we spent plenty of money, but keep in mind we're running $700, $800, $900 million surpluses. So even spending money, you're able to bank a considerable amount. And so we've got over $2 billion in the bank. That's not counting a rainy day fund. So there's real money sitting there. There is no crisis in state government. Now, there is some difference on how much additional money we fund at Medicaid because of potential cuts that we see coming from the federal level. There's no denying that. We enjoy an enhanced match. So that's a real issue. Now, we hadn't gotten there yet. And, I hear a lot of talk about, well, these cuts that are coming to the Department of Education, that they've already received their letter, and Department of Health. We'll deal with those. Mississippians voted for President Trump just like our country did. And he was very transparent on the front end about what he was going to do.
Right.
And we're gonna do our part there. The sky's not falling there. It appears that most of those funds were to be spent on things pandemic related. Well, we're past the pandemic. That stuff's over with. It's time for us to assess core functions of government wherever they are, including at the Department of Education. So we'll deal with those. We don't think the sky's falling. We think it's probably what was to be expected from a Trump administration, and we're proud to embrace it and try to figure out a way forward.
I remember from when I used to put budgets together for Governor Barber that it's almost easier, not in terms of the substantive piece of this, but in terms of making the numbers work. It's almost easier when money's tight because you can say no. But when you're sitting on billions, everybody wants if we could just get this $1 million, right, we can do all this great stuff.
Your memory serves you well, Lucien, because that is exactly my first few years in the legislature. We were cutting budgets, trying to make a budget, and we went from a place like that to a place of these tremendous surpluses. So it is a different deal, and it's much more complicated when all that money's laying around and politicians get itchy trigger fingers.
Well, and everybody's got a project that's, in the grand scheme of things, inexpensive, but, $1 million here, $1 million there, and pretty soon you're out of money. You got time for a second segment?
Absolutely.
I know you got a tight timeline this morning.
Yeah, we're good.
Y'all stick with us. This is Lucien Smith in for Richard here on Mornings with Richard Cross. We'll have more with Speaker Jason White coming up next. Good morning, everybody. This is Lucien Smith in for Richard here on Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk Mississippi. We've got with us Speaker of the House Jason White. If you've got questions or comments, send us a text to the C Spire text line at 601-879-4395. Speaker, so procedurally, the fiscal year for the state ends at the end of June. So y'all have to work this out before July 1st, or I'm assuming there's a state government shutdown?
No, we're not going to have a state government shutdown.
Okay.
A few times that budgets have not been passed before July 1st, the governor is able, through some emergency powers, to run it for even a little while longer.
Okay.
To smooth out a landing if there's one needed to be. But I don't foresee that at all. We're not in any danger of that. My House members, again, weren't. We wish we would have passed the budget in regular session. We wanted to pass a budget, but we were going to do it in an orderly and transparent way. And I guess the Senate thought we were kidding when we told them that. Now they know we're not kidding, and I don't know why they thought that. Everything we've told them, we've been pretty clear about where we were on issues that, it almost led to no education budget last year when we told them we funded MAP for the last time, and they ran it right up to sine die, and eventually, after killing that bill 3 times, all of a sudden they saw the light, and now we have an Inspire funding formula, and MAP is no longer with us. But we told them that, but it took sticking to that. So this is a very similar issue. So my House members were not surprised, and were very comfortable not passing budgets in the middle of the night, and we'll do it in an orderly and transparent way between now and the end of June. We're not that far apart on the budget. I've told you there are a few key budgets like Medicaid we have to deal with, maybe even at Child Protective Services, figuring out they need a little more money there and trying to figure out exactly what that is. There are a few agencies that need deficit funding between now and the end of the year just to get out of this current budget year. So there's some important things that we need to do in a timely fashion. Other than that, we'll figure something out on whether or not the Senate is willing to come on board with the House in funding these local city and county projects with mayors and boards of supervisors. If they don't, we can't make them. We'll have a budget. We just won't have any CapEx spend. But we're not going to punish our local governments just because somebody's upset that we passed House Bill 1. I don't want this interview with you today to be all about gloom and doom. We're going to get there on the budget. I'm confident about that.
Are the two sides talking?
Yeah, we're talking. We're talking. I think our appropriators will probably start meeting next week. To get some semblance of an agreement. We're not going to be down there in session and start from scratch. So the governor is going to require us to have an agreement hammered out before we get there, so that we're only there a day or two to deal with that.
So that was going to be one of my questions. You do think that's the way it's going to work? Y'all come to an agreement, yes, and then he brings you back?
Yeah. I don't think he would. He's been pretty clear from his first day as governor that he would be very judicious about calling a special session. And, my phone's ringing off the hook every day from folks saying, hey, could you get the governor to add this to the call, or get the governor to add this to the call? The
C Spire text line is lighting up with people who've got ideas for general bills that should be there.
Well, I have 40 things I wish we could add to it, but...
You think it'll be a clean call?
I think it'll be a clean call unless we could have an agreement on a couple of issues that were big issues in the session, and we'll see. We'll see where we get. We were... with all of the success of House Bill 1, we were able to eliminate the personal income tax over a 14-year period. That is conservative, and that is in a way that is doable. We cut the grocery tax from 7 to 5. We found a dedicated stream. We adjusted that 1987 gas tax funding formula for roads and bridges and maintenance and got it to a place where over a 3-year phase-in period, we'll actually be able to begin to kind of run MDOT more the way other states do it, while our gas tax will still be lower than any southern state, and all of our sister states will still be 10 to 15 cents lower. So we're more than competitive in the gas price as it relates to the amount of tax there, and it'll be on an index going forward. So hopefully we won't be back in this situation where we're scrambling around looking under couch cushions for money to fund roads and bridges at MDOT.
So it'll automatically increase over time.
Yes, it's limited. It can never go up more than 1 cent every other year. So it's got a cap on it, and which again is a good conservative feature that we're proud of. Now. To get those things, we did have to take the lieutenant governor's 5th tier created for PERS. So as we approach this special session, the other thing for us that we are really hung up on is a dedicated stream of funding to address that deficit at PERS. The 5th tier may be part of the equation, but if you don't put some extra money going to that deficit, we already know all kind of smart folks on both sides of the aisle have said, if you don't figure out some additional stream of revenue for them, the long-term stability and viability of it doesn't look good. And so the House has been clear. House Bill 1 originally had $100 million annually going from lottery revenue directly to the PERS deficit. So we're going to continue to fight for that even through this special session and try to get somewhere on that. And we hope our Senate colleagues will come along and realize that that is a super important issue, and folks are watching that really close. So we'll continue to push for that as it was originally in House Bill 1. Now, having said all that about the budget, it was an incredibly successful session looking at where we were able to move our state to a no personal income tax state. I equate that to so many other pieces we've been able to knock off the board or off the table over the last few years that have opened Mississippi wide open on a national stage. And I'm telling you, when we go places now to other states, to a legislative conference, people actually want to come to the Mississippi booth and say, hey, what's going on there now? You know, it's
you have got national recognition.
It's cool to be from Mississippi, and our legislators are on panels discussing what we're doing instead of sitting there listening to what's cool happening in Tennessee or Texas or Florida or whatever. They actually want to hear from us, and so that's been neat. Now the phones have been blowing up about our personal income tax. Hey, how did y'all do that? I would just say for us, it started way last summer. We had meetings, select committees. We had a summit, brought in people from all over the country, and built that moment. Nobody was surprised in January when we came out with that bill. We almost telegraphed what we were going to do.
Right.
Now, with that, we were also able to do some other things. We were able to finally pass a DEI ban that took a little bit to get across the finish line, but we were able to get that done. Parental leave for state employees. We were one of the only states that didn't do that. So, you know, we claim that we are the safest place in Mississippi, and here in Mississippi, we're the safest place in the nation for an unborn child, and we want to foster that and families and all of that. This was one more thing to say. We're pro-life in so many other ways. So we were proud to get that across the finish line. We've got a certificate of need reform bill that's on the governor's desk now. We hope he's going to sign that, and those would be major pieces to our legislative session that we would consider incredibly successful. We were disappointed our education pieces didn't get across the finish line. I think that's where we'll turn our attention this summer and into the fall. I think that's probably too complicated to get into a special session. The Senate's not there. All of our bills died down there without even a committee vote. So we're going to continue to kind of push the envelope on the education freedom issue. It aligns perfectly with President Trump's administration and the direction they want to take public education.
And you were there in 2013, weren't you, when the last bill passed?
I was there. I heard about how fast and hard the sky was falling. And it's from folks that are still around pushing that status quo education stuff. So, you know, if you saw yesterday, the vice president tweeted and posted some stuff about our numbers here in Mississippi. It was pretty cool to see that acknowledgement, even from the White House, and a lot of folks, retweeted it and commented and talked about it and all that sort of thing. But it reminded us all, and we talked about it in a couple of different group texts. Man, how bad of people we were when we passed those bills. You remember, you were around
absolutely.
when all that happened.
I remember the parents' campaign talking about how it would harm children. I had the state ran that operation for Governor Bryant, and I remember sitting down with the state superintendent of education who said, this is an agenda that'll harm children.
It'll harm children. And instead, it's gone the exact other way.
Exactly.
So we're going to continue to push that going forward and see where we get. We think it is time for real conversations about what is best for kids and parents who, by the way, happen to be taxpayers.
That's right.
That are paying the bill. So this is not about a knock on public schools. I think in most situations, public school is probably most people's number one choice. That's not
and it has
the
been
issue.
every other state that's done something like this.
And we put our money where our mouth was over the last several years in the form of real teacher pay raise that got us off the bottom, a couple of them almost back to back that got us up to a better place, ranking nationally among our peers, as well as our funding formula. We're in a real place where we didn't have a fight this year about the funding formula.
Is that ever going to come? I mean, is that fully fully funded forever?
It is.
I mean, I recognize it has to be appropriated.
It has to be appropriated, but we didn't. There was no fight about the funding formula this year. We funded it even from the very first meetings of JLBC, and everybody seemed to be happy with it. We're happy with the transparency and predictability it brings for us.
We're coming up against this break. You got any final thoughts here? We've got about 30 seconds.
No final thoughts. I'm proud of my House members who were able to make House Bill 1 a priority to build up Mississippi and set the stage for Mississippi's next big move on not only a southeastern but a national average. We're excited about the future in Mississippi. The momentum is real, regardless of what you might hear out of other camps.
Well, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to be here, Speaker. Thanks for all y'all got done.
Thank you, Lucien. Good to be here.
Y'all, this is Lucien Smith in for Richard here on Mornings with Richard Cross. Stick with us for more coming up next.
Now I know I can't